The doorman at the Blue Oyster closed the car's passenger side door. He lifted his hand to the rim of his grey top hat and gave a salute. "Good night, Mrs. Collins." He retreated out of the rain back to the nightclub's door, under a canopy that complained about the wind. Elsa was only alone in the Plymouth for a heartbeat. Johnny bustled in, blowing out his cheeks before taking his hat off. He threw it in the back seat. "Mean weather," he said, turning over the engine. Elsa didn't answer. She was looking out at the monochrome downtown of L.A. The lights on the hoardings of the Ritz were still on, promoting the hot film of 1950 so far, No Man of Her Own. "Thanks for taking me home, Johnny," she said quietly. He glanced away from the hypnotic dance of the wipers. "Anytime, anything. You only have to ask. You know that, Elsa." He looked back to the road. "Mrs. Collins." She smiled, turning her head. "Elsa, you can always call me Elsa. We don't have to forget everything that happened between us just because I'm married now." She sensed his frown slowly being replaced by a smile on his silhouette. He drove onto Hyperion Avenue, heading east. "You did look tired back there," he said, turning the car into the Hollywood Hills. "I guess I wasn't in the mood for the club tonight. All those people asking me what married life is like." She sighed. "But I had to get out of the house for a while." "How long has it been since you've been hitched?" 3 months? She hummed confirmation, knowing that he knew only too well. He'd probably counted the days of her month-long honeymoon. Then he'd have collected the society pages showing her and the infamous Peter Tom Collins hitting the town with the mob, often ending up at Pete's own Blue Oyster Club, where Johnny worked as his gopher. Another silence followed. They were on a street of single-story houses, the road on a slight incline. He pulled to the side, leaving the engine running. Elsa looked forward into the beam of light, spilling into the beam of the headlights. A small stream had formed in the gutter, catching the beams of light, splitting them into diamonds before disappearing into the storm drain. "Why have you stopped, Johnny?" She looked over to him. A passing car's lights blanched his face. His Adam's apple bobbed. "There's something up between you and Pete." The words rattled out like bullets, quick and fatal, killing the pretense this was just a lift home. "Johnny, please, don't ask. Pete's your boss. He's a powerful man." He looked at her. She could see his eyes had widened, his nostrils flared. She knew he didn't like reminding how far apart he and Pete were nowadays. One-time partners until Johnny had taken to the cocaine. Pete gave him the job at the Oyster for old time's sake. "And you were my..." She heard him suck in her breath, but didn't help him find the word, lover. He paused, then finished. "Like you said, we don't have to forget." She reached out to touch his forearm, feeling his muscles tense. "I don't want to forget, Johnny." He turned in his seat, reaching out to her face. She pressed her palm against him, stopping his hand. "Let's go, please." He pulled away, his arm jolting back like 1,000 volts had hit him. He wrenched at the wheel and gunned the engine. In 5 minutes of silence, he reached the drive of the Collins Spanish colonial-style mansion. He pulled up to the front door. Johnny doused the lights and bent to look at the facade of the house. "Looks dark." "You know how Pete is. He gives the staff the night off when he's doing accounts." Johnny laughed, checking his bookies and his bookkeepers. "Make sure they aren't cheating on him, you mean?" "Same old Pete," he said laconically. "Yes, same old." Elsa coughed, leaning forward in the seat. She dabbed her eyes. "Elsa, do you have a handkerchief?" Johnny pulled one from his breast pocket, handing it to her. "Baby, what's the matter?" Elsa fumbled for the door handle, not replying as she stepped out. "Elsa!" Johnny followed quickly. She left the car door open, stumbling in the rain towards the porch, looking in her small purse for the key. Behind her, she felt Johnny's form. His hands were on her upper arms, but she managed to open the door into the hall. She staggered forward, almost dragging Johnny inside onto the carpeted hallway. She turned around. Johnny was there, holding her arms again. "Elsa!" He used her name as a question once more. "What is it?" Elsa looked up at him, then nervously at the darkened stair behind them. She disentangled herself from his arms, to turn on a light that blared weakly into the darkness, barely pushing it aside. "It shouldn't be like this, Johnny. I know that. I thought Pete was a good man, well, to his friends, and a man and wife should be friends, shouldn't they?" She let the mink stole slide from her shoulders, casting it into the shadows, where it lay, a wolf-like predatory form. "What are you saying, Elsa? What's he done?" She turned her back to him. "Undo my dress." "What?" He sounded incredulous. Elsa turned her head to the side. "Just do it, please." She felt his hands on her bare shoulders, then him fumbling with the zipper until it was lowered to the small of her back. She shrugged the spaghetti straps off her shoulders and listened as he whistled, a low sound diving into a profound quiet. She flinched away when his fingertip gingerly touched one of the dark bruises on the side of her ribs. "He did this? Your husband Pete did this?" She pulled up the thin yellow satin. Johnny helped fasten the zipper. She turned around and came close to him. "He's mad, Johnny, deranged." She stepped closer and whispered, "But he's so careful. See how he hits me when no one can see? Then, when we're out, he puts his arm around me, and when he squeezes me, I feel the bruises. I think he likes that." She stifled a sob, looking up the stairs, then back into Johnny's face. "I'm frightened. I don't know what to do, Johnny." She leant into him, turning her face, resting against his chest. She felt his hands on her back. "Your family?" Elsa could hear from the tone that Johnny was just casting around for ideas. She shook her head against him, then pulled back to meet his eyes. "There's no one that could stand up to him. You know what he can do to those who try." Elsa walked away with a resigned sigh, entering the front reception room. She turned on a table lamp and poured a finger of amber single malt from a decanter into a cut glass tumbler. She held it out to Johnny, who shook his head curtly. She opened a rosewood box and pulled out a cigarette. The lighter flared in her hand. She exhaled smoke into the table lamp's cone of light, then picked a tiny strand of tobacco from her tongue and looked at Johnny. A muscle in his jaw was twitching involuntarily. "He's up there now. His office is up there." With a jerk of his head, he indicated the dark stairwell, his voice growing hoarse. Elsa nodded. "I guess he won't be long before he's finished." She took a drink of the whiskey. "I'll go have a talk," Johnny said. "No, Johnny." She dropped the glass onto the carpet, catching him up as he was reaching the first step of the stair. "Talking's no good. If he knows I said something, well, I don't mind what he does to me, but if he knows you know..." She stopped speaking, swallowed and bit her lip. "Then I'll do more than talk," he said, reaching inside his jacket pocket and pulling out a snub-nosed automatic. His hand caressed it. They both knew he'd used one before. "Johnny, no, you can't. You want him to keep beating you up? Where's it going to end? Men like him, they're scum." He paused, licked his lips. She could almost see his thoughts running across his face. "You made a mistake, baby. We can put it right." He nodded, beginning to look pleased with his idea. "No one will know it was me. You tell the cops you found him done in. Then we stand up for each other." Elsa sat at the bottom of the stairs, leaning against the banister post. She shook her head, seeming in a daze. She gazed up at Johnny. "That's so dangerous." She looked at him, an almost disbelieving half-smile playing around her face. You'd even think of doing this for me." She let her words trail off. "Like I said in the car, anything for you. Then after a while, once it's all settled, you and we could get together." Her voice sounded dreamy. She looked off into the distance, then up, back into Johnny's eyes. Unhurriedly, he folded his arms, looking down at her. "That's quite some invitation," he said, half a smile curling his lips.